In the blood-soaked scrolls of China history, few names carry the weight of a prophecy as profound as Li Mu. Imagine an era where the Qin, a relentless machine of black iron, was swallowing the world whole. Every hero had been crushed, and every kingdom had knelt before the shadow of the first emperor. But at the very edge of the abyss, there stood a single white-haired guardian. He was the last wall of Zhao, a man of such strategic brilliance that the history books whisper a chilling truth. When Li Mu stands, Zhao stands. When Li Mu falls, Zhao is lost. Yet this legend, recognized as one of the four greatest generals of the Warring States period, did not begin his journey with the cheers of a nation. Instead, it began with the stinging insult of being called a coward by his own people. Before we witness the impossible genius that allowed him to shatter 2,000,000 Qin veterans with only half that number, we must understand the cold, patient logic of a man who redefined warfare through iconic Chinese generals. Quotes, "Why did his own king eventually betray him? Why did his enemies fear his silence more than his sword?" Welcome to 81 Chinese Generals. Subscribe now, and let us dive into the amber-lit shadows of China history, where loyalty is paid for in blood, and a single man's honor becomes the last barrier to a tidal wave of conquest. Sent to the frozen winds of Yanmen Pass, Li Mu faced the Xiongnu nomads born in the saddle who struck like a blizzard and vanished like smoke. They were the nightmare of the northern border, but Li Mu did something that shocked his own soldiers. He closed the gates and threw away the key. His orders were absolute, and to many they were humiliating. If the enemy comes, we hide. Anyone who draws a sword to fight will be executed. For years he sat behind those stone walls, using the people's taxes not to buy glory but to feed his men meat and grain every single day. He watched from the ramparts as the Xiongnu laughed, riding up to the gates to spit on his honor. His own soldiers whispered in the dark, calling the white-bearded general a broken coward who was afraid of the very shadow of a horse. But Li Mu remained stoic, mending armor by candlelight and gathering intelligence on every move the Khan made. He understood a vital truth found in the best Chinese generals' quotes: "The deadliest trap is built in total suffocating silence." He was not hiding. He was conditioning his enemy to forget he was a predator. He was a hunter, and the nomads were about to walk into a trap that had been years in the making. By the year 244 BC, the king of Zhao could no longer endure the shame of Li Mu's strategy. He believed the borders were being mocked because of a general who refused to fight. Li Mu was stripped of his command and replaced by a man who promised bravery. The result was a catastrophe that stained the snow red with Zhao blood. Desperate and humiliated, the king returned to Li Mu, begging him to save the north once more. Li Mu agreed, but only with total autonomy. He returned to Yanmen and immediately resumed his cowardly ways. He released thousands of cattle into the golden grasslands, acting as if he were too scared to protect even his own livestock. The Xiongnu Khan, blinded by years of looking down on the white-haired general, saw an easy feast. He saw a man who had learned nothing from the previous defeat. The Khan gathered 1,000,000 riders, convinced the Great Wall would crumble under his horse's hooves. They didn't realize that every step they took toward the cattle was a step into a grave Li Mu had been digging for a decade. The lion was no longer sleeping. It was merely waiting for the prey to put its head into the jaws. The silence of the north shattered as a sound like thunder echoed through the valleys. From the tall golden grass, 1,000,000 archers rose like vengeful spirits. This was the moment Li Mu's spring finally uncoiled with lethal force. 1, 3, 0, 0. War chariots hidden in the mountain passes, charged with the fury of 1,000 storms, cutting off every escape route. This was the first great pincer movement in documented China history, a strategy so perfect it would be studied for millennia. The Xiongnu found themselves trapped in a circle of bronze and blood. They tried to flee, but everywhere they turned they met the wall of Li Mu's discipline. The chariots cut their ranks like a scythe through wheat, while the archers darkened the sun with a cloud of black arrows. It wasn't a battle. It was a massacre of an entire nomadic generation. By sunset, 100,000 riders lay dead on the plains. The Khan fled into the deep desert with nothing but his life, and for over a decade, not a single nomadic horse dared to cross the border. Li Mu had proven that the greatest victory belongs to the one who can wait the longest. This is the weight of Chinese generals' quotes. To win, you must first become invisible, then unavoidable. By 233 BC, the state of Zhao was a ghost of its former self, crippled by famine, and the memory of the 450,000 men buried alive at Changping. Now the Qin Black Tide was returning to finish the job. They brought 200,000 battle-hardened veterans led by the ruthless Huan Yi, a general who had Bowser Biat Dane Thut Bai. In this hour of absolute despair, the king of Zhao sent a desperate message to the north. The coward is our only hope. Li Mu was summoned to the capital Handan and promoted to Wuan Lord, the Lord of Martial Peace. It was the same title once held by the monster Bai Qi, and the irony was not lost on him. He left his quiet mountains for the political viper pit of the court, knowing he was fighting the very inevitability of China history. As he marched toward the front lines on his white warhorse, he saw the hollow eyes of his people. He knew the kingdom he served was rotting from within, but his spirit remained as firm as the stone walls of Yanmen. He gathered his 100,000 survivors and militia, preparing to hold the line against a storm that had swallowed every other kingdom. In the darkest chapters of China history, the greatest shields are forged in the hottest fires of necessity. At the Battle of Fei, the odds were a death sentence. 200,000 Qin veterans against 100,000 Zhao militia. Li Mu did what the world now expected of him. He built walls, and he waited. For weeks, the Qin general Huan Yi mocked him, calling the old man a coward once again. But Li Mu's skin was as thick as his fortifications. He watched the Qin army grow, frustrated, their discipline slipping under the weight of their own arrogance. Finally, Huan Yi made the mistake Li Mu had been praying for. Frustrated by the stalemate, the Qin general divided his forces to attack the city of Fei, thinking Li Mu too scared to move. But Li Mu was not a wall. He was a tidal wave. The moment the Qin main camp was vulnerable, Li Mu struck with the speed of a falling star. He didn't chase the army. He cut their heart out. The night was filled with the screams of 100,000 Qin soldiers as their camp turned into a furnace. It was a surgical strike that shattered the Qin's supply lines and their pride. Huan Yi fled into the darkness, never to return. This victory cemented one of the most powerful Chinese generals' quotes: "A wall is not built of stone, but of the moment you choose to strike." The black tide had been turned back. Stung by defeat, the first emperor sent his ultimate weapon, Wang Zhen. This was the final chess match of the era. Two of the greatest military minds now stood on opposite sides of a river, staring at each other across the valley of Shifang. For an entire year, neither man moved. Wang Jian, a master of siege and supply, found his match in the man who refused to break. Every trap Wang Jian set, Li Mu saw through. Every flank he tried to turn, Li Mu was already there. It was a stalemate that frustrated the world. Wang Jian, sitting in his tent, realized a bitter truth. As long as Li Mu leads the Zhao army, the gates of Handan will never open. He understood that the only way to break a shield this strong was to attack it from behind. This leads us to one of the most tragic lessons in Chinese generals' quotes. The sword that cannot be broken on the battlefield will be melted by the poison of whispers at home. Wang Jian stopped thinking about soldiers and started thinking about gold. He knew the king of Zhao was a man of small vision and large fears, and that would be the crack in the wall he needed to exploit. Gold is a weapon that makes no sound, but its wounds never heal. Wang Jian sent mountains of it to the Zhao court, buying the soul of Guo Kai, the king's most trusted official. The whispers began: Li Mu is too popular. The soldiers follow him, not the king. He is planning to join the Qin. The king of Zhao, paralyzed by paranoia and jealousy, believed every word. He sent a royal decree to the front lines. Li Mu, hand over your command and return to the capital immediately. Li Mu stood on the ramparts of his fortress holding the scroll in his shaking hands. He knew what this meant. If he left, his soldiers would be slaughtered and his nation would vanish. If he stayed, he was a rebel. He looked at the faces of the men who had bled for him, and then at the city he had sworn to protect. He chose to stay. He invoked a dangerous principle. A general in the field is not bound by the king's orders if they lead to the nation's ruin. He chose the people over the king, knowing that in the eyes of the law he was now a dead man. He had defended Zhao for a decade, but he could not defend himself from the corruption within. The end did not come with the glory of a battlefield. It came with the cold silence of an executioner's cell. In 229 BC, Li Mu was captured and sentenced to death by the very state he saved twice. The historical records tell a story so tragic it seems like a myth. Because of a war injury that left his arm crippled, Li Mu could not hold the sword to his own neck. In his final act of defiance and despair, he placed the blade in his mouth and threw his body against a stone pillar. As his blood stained the floor of the palace, the last wall of Zhao finally collapsed. The people of Handan wept in the streets, for they knew the truth. Li Mu was the only thing keeping the darkness away. Without his shield, the gates were wide open. 3 months after his death, Wang Jian and the Qin army poured into the city like a black flood. The king who had betrayed his hero was dragged away in chains, and the state of Zhao was erased from the map of China history forever. Li Mu did not lose a single battle in his life, yet he lost everything because of a lie. A nation is only as strong as the people it chooses to trust. Li Mu's life is a scar on the soul of history, but his spirit is immortal. He teaches us that a hero is someone who stands alone when the world has surrendered. In business, his legacy is a masterclass in strategic patience. He shows us that accumulating resources in secret and waiting for the enemy to grow arrogant is the only way to win against impossible odds. He shows us that loyalty to the mission is higher than loyalty to a failing system. Today, he is worshipped as one of the gate gods, a protector who stands at the entrance of homes to ward off evil. His Chinese generals' quotes remind us that true strategy is not just about the sword, but about the courage to wait, to endure, and to stand alone. He was a man who sacrificed his honor for his people and then sacrificed his life for his nation. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the legends of the 81 Chinese generals. If Li Mu's story moved you, we have a question for you. Is absolute loyalty to a corrupt leader a virtue or a crime? Comment 1 if you think he was a hero, or 0 if you think he should have fled. Also comment which general you want to see next. I am your guide, and the legends of the East never die.